A great place to go to find some websites that will show you the way JavaScript can interact with the website is this awards website with the extra W's in here. And I have that website pulled up over here. And you can come here and look through some of the different sites that have won awards. And they tend to be pretty innovative and interesting sites. I have a few pulled up that I just pulled up just now. These aren't pulled up for any special reason other than that I looked at them and I thought that they had some interesting interactions, whether you're talking about following the mouse or coming over here and the animation around the circle or the way these images pop in, this is all being done with JavaScript, this kind of thing. And then, here we are on the NASA, on one of the NASA spacecraft website here, and you can click on one of these things and it'll come up and show you the different pictures and give you some other interactions, including some sounds as you work around it. Or this website over here, which as you scroll through does some interesting interactions as you're scrolling through the website, that kind of stuff. So look around on the web, and wherever you see interactions happening, whether, it's a map like this or all kinds of interactions are being created by JavaScript. Great, you've seen some interactions on websites, and you've probably seen plenty of others in other websites or gone off and found your own. But let's talk about some other reasons why we should learn JavaScript. First of all, it's the most popular programming language in the world, and that's a really exciting thing to find out about JavaScript and a good reason to learn JavaScript. There's also a low barrier of entry to the field, whereas if you're learning Java or C or C++, you're going to need a lot of experience before you can get to a really good paying job. But JavaScript and the web is kind of the gateway to programming and to the tech industry in this way. So it's really good to learn JavaScript for that reason. And then finally, it is the language of the web. And now it goes well beyond the web. We have Raspberry Pi and other devices that can all be programmed with JavaScript, robots and all kinds of things where JavaScript exists. Gaming engines, the Unity gaming engine uses JavaScript as well as C#. So there are lots of places where you can use JavaScript, but it is ultimately the language of the web. It is the scripting language for the web browser, and it's native to the web browser. So that's a really great place to start with programming. The story of JavaScript is really interesting. It really is the story of an underdog who became king. JavaScript didn't start off as the most popular programming language. And it's really important to understand this path that JavaScript has taken through history because it has a big impact on how we write JavaScript. JavaScript was written by this gentleman here, Brandon Eich, in 1995 over the course of 10 days while he was working at Netscape. And I'm not going to go into great detail on the history here, but it's a really good thing to look up. It's a very interesting story in and of itself. But he wrote the language in a very short amount of time, and that's an important thing to understand about this language. Another important thing to understand about the JavaScript programming language is it's not the same language as Java. It was originally a language called Mocha, and they changed the name to JavaScript really as a marketing ploy. But it's not actually the same language as Java. They're two completely different languages, and it's easy as a beginner to get confused between Java and JavaScript. As I said before, JavaScript had some rough beginnings. The early years of JavaScript were plagued by bad implementations, developers who just despised the language, mostly due to poor documentation, and it was greatly misunderstood as a language. And this gentleman, Douglas Crockford, did a lot to help people understand the incredible value of JavaScript as a language and its strengths as well as its weaknesses. He wrote a book called JavaScript, The Good Parts. And it's a legendary book because in this book, he really talks about how JavaScript has some of the best features any programming language has ever had, right alongside some of the worst features. And becoming a good JavaScript developer is about understanding how to leverage the best parts of the language while minimizing the worst parts of the language. And we'll be seeing some examples really quickly of some parts of the language that are good and not so good right off the bat. And I'll be pointing those out, and you'll see that as we go along, we write JavaScript in ways to minimize the bad features of the language. And when I say bad features, what I mean are features that can lead to more errors, lead to confusion in the programming, and so on and so forth. But it's also a very expressive language. It's a very powerful language. Some of the ideas behind it are very interesting and very powerful, even though they're different from other languages, which was behind some of the frustration that people had with it initially. They just didn't understand it because it was different.